Hello, everybody, and welcome to the NBA Trade Zone podcast, where we talk all things NBA trades, past, present, future. Hi, guys. My name is Daniel.
And I am Sebastian, and today we're going to look forward to the next season and discuss some players, some All-Stars who are currently under contracts or some former All-Stars who we believe are going to have the best chances of being traded next year from their current teams.
Yeah, and I mean, these players, they could either... It's really 6 players who might request out from their teams. I mean, there's a lot of interesting situations, and we really just want to take a look at 6 stars who may request out from their current teams within the next year. So whether it's during the offseason, whether it's right before next year's trade deadline, I think it'll be fun to see which players might eventually want out sooner rather than later. Just like Anthony Davis has requested out of New Orleans. And he obviously will not be one of the players we discuss, as he has already requested out of New Orleans. Starting off, we have a list of about 6 players. So starting off with another Pelican and Jrue Holiday. Now, Jrue Holiday has stated that, 90% of the reason why he re-signed with New Orleans was because of Anthony Davis. And even though New Orleans is pretty keen on keeping him beyond this offseason when they plan to trade Anthony Davis, I think by next year's trade deadline, he may request to be traded somewhere else. And I think it would be very wise for New Orleans to trade him somewhere sooner rather than later, as he is having a real good year this season, really an all-star worthy year, and it would make logical sense for them to get as much as they can in return for him. He really could play both point guard and shooting guard, plays on both ends of the floor, so he's very versatile. And even though he is pretty costly, he is still only 28, I believe, so there'd be a lot of teams that he would make a lot of sense for. So what do you think, Sebastian? What type of value do you think Jrue Holiday may have comparable to other players in the league?
I think his value is going to be pretty similar or maybe a little bit higher than like a Mike Conley we're talking, just because of the age difference. I think to a certain extent, they're kind of similar players. Now, obviously, Mike Conley's more of the pure point guard than Jrue Holiday, but Jrue Holiday's younger and he's a little bit more defensive player. And he's a little bit, he would prefer to play the shooting guard position. I know the talk has been he's not as comfortable being the main floor general out there. But I think, if you are the Pelicans, obviously I agree with you that you have to trade him. I don't see the point of keeping him. But you do hope for some assets and, a couple young players and maybe, and you would also want at least a first-round pick in return.
Yeah, I like the comparison here with Mike Conley. Unfortunately for the Pelicans, he is, I believe, 3 years younger than Mike Conley. So obviously I think he'll get a little more in return. I think his value may be closer a little bit more to Bradley Beal than to Mike Conley. But the comparison in terms of players, play talent level and just skill level is very good. I think the fact that he is more comfortable playing the shooting guard position as compared to the point guard position actually raises his value because of the fact that there are so many good point guards in the league. And many teams, if he was just a pure point guard, would probably not be willing to trade for him or would not need him necessarily, which would lower his value. But the fact that he can play both positions and is actually more comfortable playing the shooting guard position is a good thing for him, because it raises his trade value a little bit, or at least we should say a good thing for the Pelicans. So yeah, I think a package of at least one solid young player and maybe a couple of first-round draft picks or vice versa, where they get 2 solid young players in a draft pick, is within reach. And I think the fact that he would fit pretty well with almost any team in the league really would just raise his value, because a lot of teams would be really fighting for his services, would be bidding for his services, and which would raise his value, which usually that's the case. So let's discuss. And again, this fit idea here is pretty is hard to gauge because of the fact that free agency is coming up and a lot of things could happen. I mean, realistically, I think if Drew Holiday requests a trade, it'll probably be by next year's trade deadline, not necessarily by this summer. I think he'll give it a chance with New Orleans for at least half a season. But and a lot could happen in free agency. Who knows who will go where? But just in pure fit, at least from this year's standpoint, where do we think he would fit best if he were to request out of New Orleans?
Well, I'll mention a couple teams that I think might end up becoming trade partners. I think one of the teams can be the Los Angeles Lakers. I think depending on how this offseason goes, if they are unable to pull off the Anthony Davis trade and they struggle with, bringing in a Kawhi or a Kyrie or whatever else is out there, I think Drew Holiday might be like a second option there. I mean, just looking at the team right now, I know that the Lakers are just not going to be happy this offseason. I know LeBron's not going to be happy this offseason. So I do think that a potential deal there for Drew Holiday there is one that can be made. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would really like him on the Lakers, but not necessarily but I don't think he would put them over the top, and I think they really need something that would put them over the top. But yes, theoretically speaking, as a sort of even more as a second tier free agent, I guess in this situation, yeah, he would be a fantastic fit on the Lakers. Unfortunately, the fact that they would also have to give up a decent amount to get him would stunt their growth. I don't think he would be what would put them over the top. But yes, if they can get another free agent, it makes a lot of sense.
Well, I will argue that the Lakers, if the Lakers strike out and they don't trade any of their young assets, I think they can put a package around one of the players. From what it looks like now, you don't want to be trading Brandon Ingram because he's really been playing really well as of late. And I think trading Brandon Ingram from Drew Holiday might be a little bit too much. But if you offer a Kyle Kuzma in the deal, I don't think you're going to have to be giving up too much more.
Well, I think if you offer Kyle Kuzma, you still have to give up a decent amount. But if you offer a Brandon Ingram, that's when it might be a little less. And the situation with the Lakers would be tricky, too, because of Lonzo Ball's refusal to really want to go to New Orleans. I mean,
yeah, but New Orleans can figure out a way because Lonzo Ball still has value.
Because I think Lonzo Ball and Kyle Kuzma would make a lot of sense as a package for Drew Holiday. But
I think the Pelicans have a lot of options if Lonzo Ball, because I could see the Bulls, offering one of their assets for Lonzo Ball. Now I don't know if it'd be a fair deal or whatever, but the Bulls kind of need a point guard. The Magic have some assets that they can make eventually. So I do think that, that would be, this is just an option. I think the other option I had was to New York Knicks. Also, this is more of they signed KD, but they failed to get a Kemba or a Kyrie. Well, then now your next move is, okay, let's go get a Drew Holiday.
Yeah, it's another situation that unfortunately they need all the assets that they have, at least in terms of trying to develop their players. I mean, especially if they strike out. I don't necessarily know if the Knicks trading for Drew Holiday would be too wise of them. I think at that point you more or less continue on with the rebuild.
But this is if you have KD.
If you have KD, then yeah, it would make sense. Yeah. I think it would be a decent move for them. It'd be something that they could work with. Yeah, I'm trying to think of a few other things. The one I think would be pretty interesting would be Boston, and again, regardless of whether they strike out for Anthony Davis, regardless of whether they acquire him, I think he would make a lot of sense in Boston too, playing alongside Kyrie. I think a package built around Jaylen Brown and perhaps a Marcus Smart. Jaylen Brown, Marcus Smart, and any one of those picks. which still should be available even if they do strike a trade for Anthony Davis. I think that would make sense for the Pelicans to do and for obviously for Boston. What do you think about that fit?
I mean, I honestly, I'm not sure how much, if Kyrie's actually going to stay. I think you're a little bit higher than that. I think, giving up Jaylen Brown, Marcus Smart, and the pick is a lot, in my opinion, for Drew Holiday. I'm still pretty high on Jaylen Brown. I think the problem with Jaylen Brown has been that he just hasn't been giving the right amount of minutes that he should be getting based off his talent. So I don't know if I'm a fan of a deal like that. Now, if you're giving up Marcus Smart and a pick or something else, I think your value of Holiday is a little bit higher than mine. I would definitely not compare him to a Bradley Beal. So I don't think giving up Jaylen Brown and Marcus Smart would be a smart move.
Yeah, I mean, his value would be high. New Orleans would definitely not sell low on him, and they wouldn't have to. I mean, he's still got 3 years left on his contract. And even though it's pretty expensive, that's still the comfort of knowing that you have a player like that for 3 years is pretty valuable. So I think New Orleans would have a lot of options here because of the fact, especially like we mentioned, because of the fact that he's the combo guard with so much years left of control. So we could move on to actually the player that I compared him to, Bradley Beal. Bradley Beal is another player who I think may request out by next year's trade deadline. Again, I don't think he'll be a player who does it this summer. I think he may be a player who does it by next year's trade deadline. And he probably will be willing to give it another go in Washington, but I can't imagine that things will go any better and will more than likely go worse than they are going now. Even though, theoretically, Washington has been playing better since John Wall's injury, I don't think that they'll be anywhere close to 500 by next year's deadline. And with Bradley Beal still having a year and a half left on his contract, that might be the perfect time for him to request out, or either Washington just to look to trade him themselves because of knowing that his value is probably at its highest. So what type of value do you feel Bradley Beal has here?
So like I said, I think his value is a little bit higher than a Drew Holiday. I think he's a better playmaker than Drew Holiday. He's a better pure shooter, and he is younger than Drew Holiday. So for this reason, I argue that his value is higher. Now, so I would point out that I think the Lakers would be an interesting fit, especially depending on how their offseason goes. But I do think in this case, if you are the Wizards, you are asking for Brandon Ingram and another asset or draft pick or piece in return. Because of his age and how Bradley Beal has been performing.
Yeah, Bradley Beal's value would definitely be higher than Drew Holiday's because of the fact that he is younger and more of a pure scorer. I don't think it'd be too much higher, but yeah, definitely higher. I think he may be someone who could potentially net Washington 2 young players and 2 draft picks, maybe one pretty high draft pick, one pretty low draft pick. And depending on how he comes out next year, I mean, he's been on a tear, obviously. Right prior to the All-Star break, he was on a real tear. He was helping Washington win, and that was the most important part, was that Washington was winning games with him as compared to when they had John Wall leading the team. They were losing a lot of games, which probably raised his value a little more because he was proving that they could win with a team based around him. So I think it's not out of reach that 2 first-round draft picks and 2 young players will be what he is worth, and that's what they will probably not settle any less for. In terms of fit now, I think, again, there's a lot of teams. I know you mentioned the Lakers. Yeah, that's an obvious one. That's one that's been discussed many times. I think there's many fits where he would kind of be perfect around. I think an interesting one might be the Nuggets, who have a lot of solid young players and a decent amount of depth. The draft pick part would be a little more tricky because while they do have most of their future first-round picks beyond this year, I know they owe their first-round pick this year to Brooklyn, they have all their future first round picks beyond this year. However, those picks will